we are going to add to our panel at least 6 people who, what we're going to do now is we're going to go through the BITE model that Stephen just shared with us, but we're going to have people share their experiences, in life or in Mormonism or whatever, just so that we can just see how the rubber meets the road. Now, as we do this, we want to be very, very careful in that. Okay, we're going to ask all our listeners, please mute your PCs now. If you could put headsets on or whatever you have to do so that we don't get feedback. See if you can figure that out, but we don't want to get feedback. But what we've got is we've got a group of panelists who have joined us. We've got Brendan, Heidi, Carah, Paul, and Susie. And what we're going to do is we are going to go through the BITE model one by one, and we're going to have people share their experiences. And one thing that's important is we want to have a good, healthy disposition as we talk about this. So let's not be mean. Let's not be nasty. Let's not use cutting, cynical, snide criticisms or pot shots at the church. The format is, here's what I've experienced. Here's what's been hurtful for me. And, here's what I didn't love, if that makes sense. And the goal is just for us to process. We want to help post-Mormons process what they've experienced. We want to help active and believing or semi-believing members process what they're going through. We want to all learn how to have healthy organizations. And those are all sort of the goals for what we're doing. So with that, Paul, I just want to say, Paul, your video isn't showing. Everyone else, I see your videos. So we're going to bring on Heidi, Brendan, and Carah, and we hope that Paul can get video, and maybe Tim can help Paul get video. But Heidi Packard, you are a former Mormon Stories interviewee, so welcome back to Mormon Stories.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
What made you interested in this topic specifically?
I don't know. I've moved on from Mormonism, but I just, sometimes things pop up that really kind of resonate with me. And I just think, wow, that's just an interesting thing. I've always been interested in cults and this type of, kind of mind control and how you can get people to believe kind of seemingly crazy things. So I've just always been interested in that.
Beautiful. Well, your interview, for those who haven't listened, Heidi and her wonderful husband did an interview about their faith transition, and it's been amazing. You've probably got some good feedback on that, right, Heidi?
Yeah, we did. Yeah, it was good.
Yeah, thanks for doing that. All right, well, thanks for joining us. We also have Brendan with us. Brendan, tell us just a tiny bit about yourself.
How's it going? It's great that you guys are able to give a lot of us this opportunity. So thank you so much, John, and thank you so much to everybody there at the Open Stories Foundation. I am just a born and raised Mormon guy. I'm in the middle of a faith transition. I go to UVU, and I'm going to be going to grad school this fall in Mississippi. So I'm excited about this conversation. It sounds really interesting. So.
Thank you. It's great to have you, Brendan. Heidi, for those who didn't hear your interview, just tell us just a tiny bit about yourself. Give us a quick bio.
Well, my husband and I just both born and raised in the church. My husband's in active duty military. We live out in Georgia. So we kind of talked just about our faith journey and kind of how we found community in the military and just kind of post-Mormon life and how to find happiness outside of the church. I think that's what was a lot of what he talked about too was interesting, this idea of, we can get into it, but finding happiness outside of the group. So that's kind of what our podcast was about.
So you mean you guys aren't drug dealers and prostitutes in your family?
Yeah, we're not.
Okay, that's good to know. That's good
Pretty
to know.
Happy.
Okay. All right. And our third panelist for now is Carah. Carah, welcome. Tell us why you're interested and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, John. Thank you so much for inviting us to be on. I was also born and raised Mormon. I'm originally from Utah. Right now I live in Southern California. I'm really interested in this. I'm a social worker, and I just feel like some of the behaviors within the Mormon church and some of the behaviors that can be controlling can affect mental health so much. And so I'm very passionate about learning more about these things and how we can improve the Mormon church. Hopefully to make those that still want to believe and want to follow healthier, have a healthier mental life.
Thank you. It's great to have you, Carah. And you're a LCSW, is that you said?
I just finished my hours, so I'm turning in my application and hopefully we'll become an LCSW.
Where will you be practicing?
We're actually moving back to Utah, so I'll be in Southern Utah.
All right. Well, let's collaborate.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So there's four of us here now. And what we're going to do is we're going to jump to the slides and we're going to talk about each of these issues. And we're just going to have each of you share to what extent you experienced any of these things and how it might have affected you. And, we're going to try and do this in an hour. But we also want to invite listeners to share any perspective they have. So I'm going to share the screen now. And what you're going to notice is for each bullet, there's a color. So the color can be either orange, red, or green. And what that's about, I'll just explain it really briefly. What that's about is that what I tried to do was to color code it based on my experiences within Mormonism. And green means I really didn't see it as a big problem within Mormonism. Orange means that, maybe it is a problem in some context, like particularly on a mission. And then red means I think it's a problem within Mormonism. Now, again, the purpose of this isn't to call the Mormon Church a cult. It's to identify opportunities for the church to improve. And I'm just saying these are some areas where the church can improve. But let's see what you guys think, because that's even more important. So the first bullet is regulate individuals' physical reality. So, I thought that this mostly applies to a mission. When you come home, when you leave, what your regimen is, who you can talk to, can't listen to the radio, can't watch TV, can't call home. A very controlling environment. Can't date people, have to have a person with you all the time. But aside from a mission, maybe at BYU in the honor code, it seems like the physical reality isn't quite as regulated as in some more intense organizations. Now, that's just my experience. Anyone have a thought there?
I think that's a really good synopsis of it. My whole life, I feel like I was really raised within the church to go on a mission, and that was really hammered in me from a young age. So going on a mission, doing things right, and then getting into an environment where you have to do your home teaching, you have to go into do this ward activity, you have to magnify your calling, just all of these aspects of the church that are put there almost in order to keep you busy, but also to keep you from thinking of different alternatives and ways of life that you should live. So I think that's a really big one.
I love it. Heidi or Carah, anything to add about physical environment?
I would just add that I think all of those things, or most of them, I experienced that, but I wouldn't necessarily view those as problematic to the extent that at least I experienced them, because I think those are all things that can help you as a person grow and develop within like a structure of, you should try to do these types of things. It's kind of like that. I know you did a podcast recently. I think his name was Roger Hendricks. And he talked about how for him, the church was this building. It was always about progressing as a person and building yourself up and building up a community. And I think some of those things can can, at least for me, were more a positive thing in my life, and they kind of helped bring structure to my life as a teenager, as an adolescent, and gave me kind of guidance and goals and all those types of things. So although I can see how those could be problematic to an extreme, I thought that they were pretty beneficial to my life.
Yeah, and as a missionary, I dug that stuff. And as long as the rules are good and the leaders are not exercising unrighteous dominion, structure can be really positive. The military can save someone's life, and it's very, very regulated in terms of physical reality. So Heidi, thanks for bringing balance to this discussion. Carah, anything you want to add?
I don't know if it would fit under this, but I've always kind of felt like when I was in the church, there were certain ways of living that was expected of me as far as being a woman in the church. Yes, go to school, but really in the end, you're not going to have a career. You need to stay home and have children. Does that kind of fit this topic?
Yeah. Anything that comes up for you.
Yeah. So that was really hard for me, and it still is now that I'm out of the church. I'm struggling with knowing what I want for myself because I was constantly told, this is what your life is going to look like. This is how you're supposed to behave. And now listening to myself, it's been kind of, it's a new experience and kind of a scary experience. So I feel like I'm kind of deprogramming myself from finding out who I am and what I want out of life, not what an organization expected of me.
I think you've just summarized the battle. That is the battle. It's who are we? What is our identity? What do we really, what's healthy for us? What's unhealthy for us? And what type of life do we want to live? That is the battle. I tried to show that slide earlier on. We have assumed an identity that maybe fit in some ways, but didn't in others. And a really highly controlling organization, you kind of just plug in. That's where the matrix analogy can really fit. And you just got to figure out how to rebuild a new life. So that's really good. Thanks, Carah. Okay, so dictate where, how, and with whom the member lives and associates. What do you guys think about that? Do we dictate that? I mean, people move out all over the world and are Mormons, and we're not forcing them to be in communes where they can only commune with people in the little city or town that they live in. What do you guys think?
Absolutely. That one is very, very, that was very much my experience. I was always taught that you should always try to, have those non-member friends so that you could bring them to church. And that was the purpose. That was the goal. And it wasn't about having a non-member friend that was just your friend and they happen to be a non-member. And so I grew up in a bubble. I did not have I had one non-Mormon friend in high school, and I mean, that was it. And I think that was once I moved out of the Mormon bubble and actually saw non-Mormons who were happy and normal and functional and all of that, it really changed my perception of things a lot. But yeah, I think there's absolutely that element to the church.
So you're basically saying what I think is reality for most Mormons, which is you may live in Seattle, but all your friends are Mormon, all your time is spent with Mormons, all your time is in church activity or with your family. And and there are exceptions to this. I have progressive friends, I have progressive friends who, have non-Mormon friends and really great friends. So I don't want to make it sound like this is everyone's experience, but I think for the most part, a lot of Mormons across the world tend to make the friends in their ward or with their immediate family if they live near family. And they're not getting out a lot and being exposed to non-Mormon influences. But it's not the church mandating that. That's what's interesting. Carah and Brendan, anything you want to add?
I think, like you said, a lot of times it's not the church mandating it. But I know personally within some of my extended family, there was a big fear with those of us that chose to move out of the state of Utah. And I'm sure, and a couple of us that have moved out of the state of Utah have chosen to leave the church. And I have a strong feeling that once they find out that they're going to attribute us leaving to the fact that we moved out of state. I don't know that that's coming from the church, but I feel like some people in the culture feel that way, that Utah's kind of, Zion is the place to be. And so I think there is some fear and stigma about leaving the Mormon church, leaving Utah, the state of Utah.
Absolutely. Brendan, anything you want to add?
I think just to add to that, I think that makes a lot of sense, that it's not really the church necessarily mandating this, but it's more so the culture. And I would almost add that the culture almost encourages you to marry a member of the church rather than someone that's a non-member, just to encourage that same religious vibe within your family.
Absolutely. Okay. So yeah, I think we definitely tend to associate with our own. All right. How about when, how, and with whom the members have sex? Anybody want to jump in on that one? Do we do that?
Yes. Is that even like, it's just so obvious. Of course we do that. Yeah. I mean, and again, I mean, I would probably lump this in, at least when you are an adolescent, or, that's maybe not necessarily the worst thing as an adolescent. I think maybe the guilt and the shame and the, lack of ability to explore your sexuality, those are all things that can be problematic. But yeah, I mean, absolutely. No sex before marriage, and you are married for eternity. So that is your one and only sexual partner.
And of course, we must mention that if you are gay or LGBT, lesbian, bisexual, even within the bonds of marriage, somehow we're gonna control that too, right?
Yeah, I think that's the worst part of it. I mean, I think I've always felt this way, that if you fit the mold of the church, then of what their expectations are, then it can be a really great place to live and be a part of, a great community. But if you don't, because you're LGBTQ or whatever, I mean, it can be horribly destructive. So,
Brendan and Carah, anything you want to add from your experiences about sexual stuff?
I don't think I have anything to add, but I agree.
Carah, I guess there's a lot of people that just have only had sex with their partner, and maybe that's a good thing, or maybe there are people that maybe wish that they had had a chance to get to know themselves or even experiment sexually, that somehow that might have helped them, even if they ended up in a marriage or a monogamous marriage. Maybe they would have gotten stuff out of their system or gotten more experience or just known themselves or their partner better, so they could have found a good match. I don't know if Carah, Brendan, either of you want to touch that. It's kind of personal.
Yeah, I think kind of like what Heidi was saying, if you fit that cookie cutter mold, it might not affect you as much. For me, it didn't affect me, and it still doesn't, but I can definitely see how, there are people that may have wanted to experience more, and that might affect their current, marital relationship. The fact that they didn't get that opportunity before marriage.
Right. Brendan, anything you want to add?
I think everything that's been said is basically what I agree with. I think it's just such a huge part of your marriage and a huge part of who you are as a couple, and it's really good that you can, get that experience before, you're married and having just that one and only person, I guess. So.
All right. And we want to invite listeners to share their comments as we go along. And I'll try and read some of the comments that people are saying. Try to keep your comments respectful if you can. Sometimes that's hard. Anne says sexuality and Satan are so intertwined in the teachings. Marcus writes, it's like all of a sudden you realize the church might be destructive in some ways. I edited his comment a bit. Jen writes, the culture is just the fruits of the organization of the church. You cannot separate the two. The church tells you who to marry. That's true. Not as directly as like Warren Jeffs and Sun Young Moon, where they like literally assign marriages, but sometimes it's very controlling. So yeah, keep those comments coming, everybody. We'd love to share. All right, we'll go to the next bullet: controls types of clothing and hairstyles. All right, women, tell us about your experiences, and then we'll go to men.
I guess I'll go. I don't know. It's hard for me to like get in touch with these feelings because it's been a while. But yeah, it was really. I think it's the church definitely controls the issues around modesty and female sexuality and your body and the messages that you get as a young teen. Basically, that it's your responsibility to control boys' thoughts by dressing modestly. Those things are all really, really harmful. And you know, and to be fair, it's not just Mormons. There's a lot of other religions that are churches and religions that have these same types of ideas around female sexuality and female bodies in general. So yeah, Mormons are not unique in that way, but it is very problematic. And I think it's one of those areas that they really need to improve on. So.
Yeah, whether it's earring number or haircut or beard or no beard or, you know, sleeves or no sleeves, porn shoulders. Carah, anything you want to add in your experience?
You know, I think it's always frustrated me. I think it's just another way for the Mormon Church to practice control, trying to make us all look the same and behave the same. Personally, I struggled with garments. I couldn't stand them. And it's not that I wanted to necessarily dress a certain way, but my body type, they were always showing, even if I was wearing modest clothing. And every day, like I put them on, I hated it. And so I definitely agree with everything Heidi said, just about the, you know, that we have this responsibility to protect our own chastity as well as the men's chastity. But just to add, I think garments are another way of controlling what we wear. And that was a big struggle for me.
Wow, that's great. Bringing garments in is huge. What a very significant way that we control clothing, right? Thank you, Carah. Brendan, anything you want to add? You got that beard going on. What's up with that?
Yeah. That's I was a little discouraged growing up, but
that's sinful. That's
I know,
sinful,
right?
That beard.
Yeah, I think kind of what Heidi was talking about. It's kind of a bummer that the chastity and the impure thoughts is solely resting on the shoulders and the responsibilities of young women and women in the church. I think it kind of showcases this culture that men can't control their thoughts and they can't control their own abilities to control their thoughts, and that you have to fit into this one mold. Lack of individuality, so many things that are kind of discouraged just with this intense view of modesty. So
I love it. And it's common for so many religions. You know, the Jewish people wear the yarmulke, Sikhs wear the hat, and they have a certain sword, I think, that they keep in the sash. Like it's everywhere. You know, Catholics might wear a cross. They're all different ways that the different religious groups are going to control appearance, and it's not just Mormons, and it's not always bad, but it's just something to be aware of. All right, regulate diet, food, and drink, hunger, and or fasting. Do we do that? Brendan, you start.
Yeah, totally. The word of wisdom is really key in this. And within the past, couple of years or so, I've really understood and came to understand how healthy things like green tea and how healthy things like black coffee are for your diet, and how much those are discouraged within Mormonism. So I think they definitely regulate just the things that we drink, things that we eat, that we're supposed to eat healthy. A lot of people take it to the extreme and don't eat as much meat, and I think that's kind of interesting. Which those are probably good for your body in some ways, but yeah, that control is definitely there.
Absolutely. And yeah, and I like what you said. It's not that it's bad to have a health code, right? But you're basing it on what some dude wrote in 1830, right? And we may have learned a few things since then. I'm surprised at how much the Word of Wisdom got right, but it got a lot of things wrong, or it needs to add some things. Carah, what do you want to add about Word of Wisdom?
Yeah, I think as far as the diet, I find it, hilarious that, we don't drink coffee, but then we go to work parties and we all bring sugary desserts, like, in Utah, all these soda shops are popping up. And so it's, yes, I think there is a lot of benefit to following some of the guidelines in the Word of Wisdom. But then if we just focus on that, we're not looking at what are other healthy ways of living. Maybe like Brendan was saying, green tea is healthy. I did want to touch on the fasting piece. I always struggled with fasting. I don't know if I'm hypoglycemic or what, but I remember the first time I was, committed, and I said, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to fast for 24 hours. I became so physically ill to a point that I couldn't even eat. It made me more sick to eat. And now I know that about myself. I have to eat or else I get hangry and, I get very sick. And I always thought that everyone else felt that way. I always thought that, other people do this every month and you're just a baby and you don't have enough space to live this principle. And then it was in my patriarchal blessing. So then I was like, oh, God knows that I'm not doing this and that this is a problem. So I find that to be really dangerous. Again, there are studies that show that fasting can be healthy for your body, but it's not for everybody. And it definitely wasn't healthy for me.
I love it. Heidi, do you want to share anything about the food and drink Word of Wisdom?
And I just agree with everyone. One thing I just want to add, this is a little bit slightly off topic, but not quite. I think it's interesting how he broke it up into the behavior, information, thought, and then emotional control, because I feel like for different people, those categories are going to be more important to them. So for me, looking at most of these behavior things, these were not the main problems for me with the church, or they weren't the things that I struggled with. But I think it's interesting that, like, for instance, fasting, I never had a problem with fasting. And that's what I was saying before. If the rules apply to you and they're easy for you, then you can do great in the church and it doesn't bother you. But if you happen to have low blood sugar or, some other thing that makes it difficult for you, there's no room really to kind of be, to manage that and bring that into the church. And the church didn't necessarily give people the freedom, doesn't give people the freedoms to make those decisions. So anyway, I just thought that was interesting, that I think some people will be more impacted by different categories of the, was the BITE, is BITE the acronym that he used?
Yeah, BITE.
So yeah, I just think that's interesting that we have different things that that impacted us.
Absolutely. All right. So we do have a few comments on Facebook. They're around sexuality and modesty. Anne says, we often hear that women feel they're told that men can't control their reactions and sexual desires. How did this affect men growing up? Did they take that on as well? Yeah, I didn't worry about how I dressed, but I can tell you that I did sort of, I think women got sexualized. For me, obsessing about bodies and appearance and sex and modesty made it so I was probably disproportionately interested in and affected by what a woman wore, how she dressed, what she looked like. And, it took me going to Europe and honestly, just doing a lot of reprogramming so that I wasn't always sexualizing women. It wasn't until my late 40s that I really could just kind of be with a woman or look at a woman and talk to her, have lunch with a woman. And my mind wasn't thinking, how cute is she? And I think, I don't know, I don't want to blame, but I do think, Anne, the conditioning that I had around the sexualization of women, their bodies and what they wore, really screwed with my mind and made me objectify women and evaluate them based on their attractiveness sexually. And I think I probably fight that every day. Brendan, do you want to say anything about that?
I think I'd agree with that, what you said. Also, again, about the beards, I got a lot of flack growing up about having facial hair, and that was kind of a bummer. I had to always say, you know, Jesus had a beard, Brigham Young had a beard, like, come on. And, you know, all of these kind of things. I also had like, I went to EFY one year and I had holes in my pants. They made me patch them up before I could go in. So that's in no way near what women have to go through. But I think in some cases, especially with this millennial generation, that happens with men in a minor case as well.
Yeah, thanks to Ann. Heidi and Carah, did you want to add anything to that?
I think that when for men, when women are constantly sexualized, that's what's going to be on your mind. I don't know, my husband, he was a lifeguard, and so he saw women in, you know, bathing suits all the time. He went into healthcare, so he took, you know, anatomy courses. So for him, the human body's anatomy. And I think that the church makes it all sexualized, actually creating more high behaviors that they're trying to avoid, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Lindsay writes, I had the experience of my mom buying into the abstinence culture, and she didn't allow me to participate in sex ed in school. Fortunately, I didn't have any issues with risky sex, but research has shown that not having healthy sex education makes those risky experimentations more likely. Again, not necessarily the church itself promoting this, although I think they do in Utah, but I think it is a very common cultural thing. And that's true. Natasha Elfer Parker tells us frequently that when you have a sex education, you're actually either less sexually promiscuous or at least careless or irresponsible. You're more healthy, and it doesn't work like people fear. So that's great. Good stuff. Good feedback. All right, this is a really great conversation. I don't know that we're going to get this done in an hour. We may have to extend this to other portions as future episodes. But let's look at the next one, manipulation of deprivation and sleep. You know, I have that as a green because, you know, Stephen talked about getting 3 hours sleep a day because you were constantly working for the cult. And, but what do you guys think? Manipulation and deprivation of sleep. Is that something we can associate with the Mormon experience in a way that's meaningful, other than just the fact that life gets busy and sometimes being a mother or working hard, you don't get as much sleep?
Yeah, I think it's hard I think it depends on the individual. You know, I was in the Young Women's presidency, and I had a president that, you know, wanted everything to look nice, have all the decorations, and she definitely had sleep deprivation because she chose to take it to that extent. I don't know that it's necessarily the church asking people to do that, but I think it can happen on an individual basis.
Right. Anyone else have a thought there?
I agree with Carah. I think it's, I think that does happen. I've also known women that I've worked with in the church who have done similar things. And I just think that is a personality trait that they had, and that the church kind of was their thing that they were kind of obsessed with at the time or whatever. But I think those people with certain personality traits like that, they're always going to find something to, you know, be working on that would maybe stress them out, or, you know, they would be deprived of sleep for. So I don't necessarily see that as something that's, you know, really part of what the church teaches or causes.
Brendan, I see you nodding your head.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I don't think I really experienced anything of that sort growing up, nor have I really experienced any of that within Mormonism. And I can't remember, maybe you guys can correct me if I'm right, but I don't know if in the Word of Wisdom, isn't there something about waking up early and retiring to bed early and waking up early or something? Is that something in the Word of Wisdom, or am I thinking of something else?
I'm not, you guys know, Heidi or Carah?
Well, I know there's a primary song, early to bed and early to Rise makes a man help, right? I'm sorry, I'm singing on Facebook, but right? Isn't that a primary song?
Maybe that's what I was thinking of.
Primary, so
No, for sure.
It's got to be somewhere in the doctrine, you know. But
Yeah.
that's also something that, like, I think that's in Poor Richard's Almanac and Benjamin Franklin, or you know, Benjamin Franklin's autobiography. Like, that's just kind of an American idea. So I'm not sure that that's unique to Mormonism.
Susan writes, one of our listeners, early morning seminary. I was always groggy during that time. That's true. For those who don't go to release time seminary in Utah or Arizona or Idaho, I woke up as a high school student at 5 a.m. so that I could drive to school by 6 to do seminary from 6 to 7. Kids did that in Seattle. Kids do that all over. And, you know, that's an impressionable age, but I don't think the church is intentionally trying to sleep deprive you. I just think they're trying to help you get the religious education in. And where they can, they're doing release time, which is probably humane for Mormon kids in Utah and Idaho and Arizona and wherever else they do it. Jen writes, women are overworked because they have a lot of children and more responsibilities in home. Men are overworked because they have these all-consuming leadership callings. Teenagers oftentimes have early morning seminary. As a whole, a high-demand religion will cause overworking among their membership. Wow, Jen, that was good analysis. I want to be your friend, or at least have you on the podcast sometime. Thank you for sharing.
Hey, John?
Yes, Heidi. Oh, Carah.
My brother-in-law's listening in, and he had an insightful comment. He just messaged me. Missionaries. So I didn't go on a mission. So he was saying that there's an 8-hour requirement, but he was wondering, isn't there research that you should probably get more sleep? Because not only are they required to only sleep 8 hours, but then they're asked to go, you know, work out in the hot sun in some places and go door to door. And so maybe on a mission, like you were saying at the beginning, there's a little bit more control there than the general membership.
Yeah, absolutely. I love it. Okay, let's go to the next one. Financial exploitation, manipulation, or dependence. Now, I'll just say, for those who haven't checked it out, there's a wonderful movie called Wild Wild Country on Netflix, which is a 6-hour documentary about the Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh cult in Oregon. You can also watch Holy Hell on Netflix, which is another wonderful documentary about a cult. You can watch Going Clear about Scientology. You can watch the Leah Remini stuff. You know, those organizations have financial exploitation. The Moonies, where you literally give everything to the church, everything. You just give them your paycheck, and they help you survive or take care of you, but you're completely dependent upon the organization. I'm just going to say right now, Mormonism is not like that, at least to that extreme. But do you guys feel like, should financial exploitation be red? Should it be orange? Should it be green? Who wants to speak up about that?
I think it should be red.
Why? Why, Carah?
You know, I was just thinking, didn't the prophet recently go to Africa and say something about, you know, if these individuals who are in poverty, if they would start paying their tithing, that maybe they could break the cycle. He said something to that extent.
Yeah.
And that was disturbing to me. Like, what religions are supposed to help the poor and the needy, and we're taking money from them. Yet we'll give them money at the same time, which is what I think creates that interdependence on one another, instead of just saying, okay, you're not in a good financial situation, so we're not going to make you pay tithing, we'll help you out. But I think the fact that they're asking for it is part of the cult-like behavior of creating that interdependence, if that makes sense. So
Yeah.
Again, it goes back to what Heidi was saying, you know, for some people, tithing's not a big deal, and they're financially, you know, secure and, you know, manage their money well. But for some people, that 10% can be in the red, and I think can be a huge problem.
Yeah, I can tell you every other religion outside of like some of these more extreme, say 10% of your gross or net income. That's outrageous. Brendan, what are you nodding about?
Yeah, I've had a lot of talks with family members about this, but especially with like the newest revelations that I think Mormon Leaks came out with recently about the church being so involved in the stock market and $32 billion or whatever. It just kind of put it into a whole new perspective for me. And I think a lot of people in the church, and just like Heidi was saying, this may be healthy where they associate paying tithing with blessings, and they love those blessings and they need those blessings. But I think a lot of people also just, it's really hard to pay that money, and it's really hard to pay it to an organization that has so much money and says that they need it from you.
Yeah, absolutely. Heidi, you want to add anything? You guys probably paid a little bit of tithing in your day.
Oh yeah. I feel like tithing, okay, I'm going to compare it to, so we live in the South. There is literally a church on every corner, and almost everyone that I know goes to church. And I've talked a lot about this with my friends who are, not non-Mormon, but church-going friends. And, most of them pay a tithe to their church, and they almost view it as like the fee that you pay, right? Like, you're not going to be a freeloader. You're going to go to this church every Sunday and benefit from all the things that they provide, like the nursery and all these kind of things. You should pay something to the church if you can. And I agree with that. I mean, the church is an institution. They have to have money to fund themselves, right? So I don't really have a problem with tithe in general, but within the Mormon church, it's problematic for two reasons. I think, first of all, you have to pay a full 10% in order to go to the temple, in order to receive the highest ordinances within the church. And so your eternal salvation is dependent upon your ability to pay 10% tithe. So I don't, other churches don't do that. They do not require that level of financial commitment. And then there's this, encouragement for people to go ahead and pay their tithing, even when they can't afford it. It's like, well, you can always afford it if you have faith in the Lord, and you will be blessed. And I just, you hear all these faith inspiring stories of people, whatever. But I mean, the reality is that sometimes people need that extra 10%, and the church does help. And I think that they do help people who are struggling financially. And I know that that can be a good thing. But when you read about how much money the church has and how much money they bring in from tithing compared to how much they give back to the world and to charities and to communities, and I mean, they are rolling in wealth. I mean, they built a mall, City Creek Mall. I mean, there's just so much wealth there. And I don't see them out there distributing that money to help the poor. And when they do help, mostly it's other members. It's other members of the church. It's not just the poor in general. And so that's my problem with the tithing. And that's the way that I think it's misused in the church.
Yeah. Go ahead, Brendan.
And then I'll just say one more thing. Yeah. I totally agree with that. And I think the disconnect is that if it was something to where you pay when you have money, when you're able to do it financially, if you want to, just like any other charitable donation, that would be great. But we've had a stake president get up in ward count or in our ward conference and say, this ward isn't paying enough tithing, so we have to get more tithing from other wards to subsidize your ward. And that was just like mind-blowing to me. Like, this should be a personal thing where it's not required of you. This is a church organization that I want to be a part of. So it's like kind of crazy that they would go at it in that kind of a business strategy in that way.
Absolutely. Carah, were you going to say something?
Yeah, just, as Heidi was talking about the 10% to go to the temple, I thought, we have to pay 10% to see our loved ones get married. Basically we're paying 10% to be able to go to heaven. And if we don't, and say a sibling gets married, a child gets married, we're stuck outside the temple, and everybody knows we're doing something wrong. Everyone knows we're not paying our tithing. So again, I think that's where that control comes in, is holding off rewards, these basic needs to see your loved ones get married just because you're not able or willing to pay the 10%.
Yeah. It can be felt very coercive and exploitative. I'll also add that we used to do the United Order in Mormonism, which was give everything to the church. So we did do that. We've backed away from that, probably to our own benefit, because so many cults destruct because of that. So in that way, we've become just a lot less that way. And somebody, one of our listeners mentioned sort of an obvious point for those of us who have actually been through the temple, and said it a little bit more subtly. She says there are covenants you make in the temple about resources. And I'll just say it bluntly, you covenant to consecrate everything, including your own life, for the building of God. So even though the church hasn't called in on that covenant, they could at any time. And every Mormon who goes to the temple has that covenant in their brain that at any point they will give everything to the church, including their own life, to build the kingdom. And that is a pretty, I don't think it gets more heavy than that.
No, I don't think it does. And I think that is something that I was taught before I went to the temple. I was taught that at home, that I remember one time we had this family home evening lesson, and my dad kind of was doing kind of an object lesson, and he gathered us all around, and he said, okay, I've just received, orders, or not orders, but, a calling from the president of the church. Or I think he said it was like our stake president, and that we had to sell our house and move. I can't remember where. And he had this whole scenario, and we couldn't take any of our things with us. And then it was kind of like, how would you respond? What do you guys think? And it was kind of like, well, this is what our pioneer ancestors had to do. And they gave up everything. And, and that's just part of the culture, the identity, the stories that you hear is that our pioneer ancestors were willing to give up everything, sacrifice everything so that they could build Zion. And so that's just, I would say that's not even, you don't even have to go to the temple to experience that. That's just there in all of the stories, and it's just interwoven.
Absolutely. But I want to just end with that idea that we are all conditioned to give the church everything, and that the second coming is coming, and that someday we'll have to gather to Zion, which requires total obedience and commitment. So I think we're still primed in that way, even if the church isn't calling us to it. All right, this is so useful, and we're only going to cover behavior. I'm sure you guys have lives, but Heidi, Carah, Brendan, can you stay on another 15, 30 minutes, and then we'll just end with behavior, and we'll have 3 more episodes covering information, thoughts, and emotions. Is that okay?
Yeah, that works.
All right. Unless you just want to give us the whole rest of your day. What do you guys think? I mean, we do 10 and a half hour interviews on Mormon Stories.
Let's break the record.
Let's go for 11, says Brendan. All right. The next one is restrict leisure, entertainment, and vacation time. And I gave that a yellow or an orange. What do you guys think?
I think that I would agree with the orange, because I do think that you see elements of that. Again, depending on the level of commitment, maybe from the individual and how seriously they take it. But I see that mostly in terms of fathers and big church callings, fathers who have to spend a lot of time away from home, a lot of time, at meetings, a lot of time on Sundays where they are gone. When my husband was in the bishopric, he would get up in the morning and leave before church. We would see him during church, but we couldn't even sit with him during church because he was sitting on the stand. And then I would come home with the kids, and he would be gone the rest of the evening until dinner. And so it was like a regular work day. And yet this is supposed to be a day of rest, a family day. And so I really think this is one of those things that impacts men a lot. It's just because of the nature of the, you know, the patriarchal structure of things and how the men are the ones that have these big church callings. That's not to say that women don't have also put a lot of time, a lot of their leisure time and a lot of their extra time into their church callings, because they absolutely do. So anyway.
Absolutely. Carah, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree with Heidi, and I think the orange color, it kind of depends on what calling you have, and it depends on, like I was saying before, on an individual basis, how much you're wanting and willing to put into that calling. I think as an adult, I look back at the youth programs and can't believe how much time those leaders, you know, put into it, you know, using vacation time from work to do girls camp. I mean, you really do sacrifice a lot of time that could be spent with family or on vacation, to fulfill your calling, fulfill the duties that you agreed to.
I've even heard of people for their vacation doing temple trips.
Yeah.
Like for people who don't have temples in their area, they travel to a temple for their vacation so they can get their temple work in. Not that that's awful, you know.
A really common one too is to go to, when you are a young married couple, to use your date night to go to the temple. And that's what we did all the time, was because...
Do you miss that, Heidi? Be honest.
I miss that we didn't get real dates. I mean, but that's the thing, is that you're a young married couple. You have to hire a babysitter to watch your kids, and you don't have a lot of money because, you know, like my husband was in school, so we didn't have a lot of extra money. So to go out on a date was so expensive. And then we're like, okay, well, we can just go to the temple because it's free. And so that's often what your date night was going to the temple. So yeah.
Right. Brendan, you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I mean, these are volunteer callings, right? And I think sometimes we take them a little too seriously, and we maybe do our callings while we're on vacation, just like was said, and we definitely get too engulfed with our church responsibilities, where we just can't really enjoy any vacation time. And I think that's totally true. I would agree with that.
Yeah, and the last thing, as I was reading Stephen's book, Combating Cult Mind Control, the thing that kept coming back to me is how much the Mormon mission is the most, if we're going to say cult-like, it's the most cult-like probably experience in Mormonism, other than maybe the endowment ceremony. And what I mean by that is you basically get 1.5 to 2 years of intense cult-like conditioning, and on your mission, your leisure, your entertainment, your vacation time, your dating, all that is severely limited. And of course that lifts when you get home, but it definitely gives you a good 1.5 to 2 years of intense indoctrination that many people, their whole lives are forged by what that they go into the mission not sure if they believe, not sure how committed they are, but boy, do some people leave that mission very committed and very devoted, right?
Yeah, I would agree with that too, John. And I think when Stephen was talking, I associated most of what he was saying with my mission, because of the such intense mind manipulation. I don't know. I wouldn't call it mind manipulation, but just this idea that you have to have the Spirit with you, and you have to stay out till this time, and if you go in earlier, then you aren't going to have the Spirit with you to teach. If you do anything out of the norm, you aren't going to have the Spirit to teach and do what you're there to do. So I think that's what I associated the most of what he was talking about with.
Yeah. All right. The next item is major. Let me see. It's major time spent with group indoctrination and rituals and/or self-indoctrination, including the internet. All right, guys. Guys and gals, what do you guys think about major time spent with group indoctrination and rituals? What was your experience?
3 hours of church on Sunday.
Okay. All right. Is that major? That is major, right? Compared to many other churches?
That is major. That's major.
Okay.
a significant amount of time.
What else?
Yes.
Well, I think on top of that, it's the 3 hours of church, but then it's, activities for youth, activities for the Relief Society, activities, with families. Like there's always something going on during the week. And then when you're not in church, you're expected to be doing your own personal growth, your own personal scripture study and prayer, and then also with your family. So your own family, family home evenings. So you're constantly on a daily basis. I mean, they tell you that, that you should always be thinking about God, which I think in the Mormon world means the Mormon church, and constantly indoctrinating yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Stephen or Brendan?
Yeah, no, missions, family home evening, 3 hours of church, just things constantly going on throughout the week, like's been said, to keep you in that mindset and personal growth, and just constantly every day doing things to keep you in that indoctrinated mindset. I would totally agree.
I have to say, oh, go ahead, Heidi.
Well, I just wanted to add one thing. Just to kind of go back to what I said earlier. All of these things that we're talking about, however, are not, it's only when they're taken to the extreme that they're bad.
Yeah.
Because on the one hand, like all of that structure and all of that time spent learning and all of that time, like family home evening, all of those things are so good. And there's so many great things about them. And so I don't want to make it seem as if I'm saying that they're not good, because I think that there's so many good things about them. I just think it's when you don't have that healthy balance. And I think there's lots of Mormons that do have a healthy balance. They're able to they can get the positive parts of it, and they can have that balance in their life, and they, have the great things, and then they can kind of keep at bay some of the more negative things. But I think it can be problematic that the time that's spent in indoctrination, but I think that there's also some really good things about it as well. So I just wanted to add that.
Heidi, you're bringing the balance. You're bringing the balance to Mormon Stories Podcast. We appreciate it. I'm just going to add that daily scripture study, daily prayer, and then family home evening are also rituals. And in family home evening, it's where you're reading constantly the doctrine, studying the scriptures, praying. It is just conditioning your mind more and more and more. When people love the Book of Mormon, you think about this for a second. People don't love the Book of Mormon at first. You read that book and it's like Mark Twain. It's like, this book's boring. It's plagiarized from Isaiah. It's a bunch of remix of the New Testament. It's a bunch of stories that are kind of entertaining, but not. And there are a few parts that just on first read were really inspirational for me. I don't want to, some of the Alma, King Benjamin stuff, some of the Mosiah stuff, the stuff in 3rd Nephi, there were beautiful parts, but overall it's kind of, it's biblical remix. It's biblical fan fiction, but you talk to people and they're like, well, there are all these problems with the church, but I can never, the Book of Mormon has just been too powerful of an impact in my life. And I just can't, it's so amazing of a book. No one could have. The reason why the Book of Mormon is so amazing to people is because they've read it 40,000 times, and they've had throughout their life, they've read it during times of their life of trial and of sadness and of struggle and of adversity and of joy. And so they're just, every time they read it, they're building these associations of sadness and guilt and shame, but happiness, joy, and healing and redemption. And so they're going to build these positive emotions in association with the book. Same at the temple. The temple, anyone goes there and it's just like, really, I have to watch this 1 billion times? But there's the celestial room and there's the memories. And so all these rituals are a form of indoctrination. And like Heidi likes to tell us, that doesn't mean it's bad, but what we have to know that when we're reading it, when we're doing family meeting, when we're going to the temple, we're conditioning our mind to end up loving it and to end up feeling deep emotions for it. Because we didn't feel that way when we first went through the temple. We thought it was weird, especially those of us who went through before 1990. Super weird and kind of like barbaric. But over time, if you do something enough, you'll get used to it and then even learn to love it. Sorry, that was a rant. I didn't plan on that.
Well, and it becomes associated with like your family history, your loved ones, your family culture. And so it becomes so much harder when you decide you're going through a faith transition. It's hard to disassociate those things with your family, people that you love and people that you really care about. So
and those are just power. I mean, the power of ritual and the power of building a community, that's something that all religions have in common. That's not unique to Mormonism. And so, and I don't know that, I mean, yes, again, it's one of those things that could be cultish if you take it to an extreme. I'm not sure that I would say that it's at an extreme level in the church. I just don't think that that's, I think the behavior parts of it are not nearly as concerning as some of the more like emotional or thought control issues. Again, I think a lot of the behavior things can actually be pretty positive, with the exception of tithing, maybe.
All right. All right. Well, Carah, were you going to jump in and say something?
I think just to bring it to like the faith transition experience, I think that this is oftentimes what makes it so hard to leave the church and come out to your family, because I know for some of my extended family and my husband's side, much of their conversation is about the Mormon church. It's about what callings what callings are you doing, your experience at the temple. And so I think that can make it challenging from a transitional point of view of how do I fit in the family now that I'm not participating in all of these rituals. I don't really have anything to add to the conversation. I just wanted to add that piece because I know we talk a lot, on your podcast, you talk a lot about the challenge of leaving the church and how do we fit in our families after when we're not indoctrinating ourselves as they are.
Love it. Okay, let's go to the next one. Permission required for major decisions. I'm gonna start with this one and just say that there was a time when the church was telling you must have kids immediately and you must have as many kids as possible. Birth control is evil and it was forbidden. There was a time when Esther Benson was telling everyone women's role are in the home. You are to stay home and have babies, and that's your job. So I'm going to start with that. We've backed off on those two things, so that's another area where we've gotten better. What do you guys think? Permission for major life decisions?
Yeah, I mean, in a way, we also ask permission on, our marriage, right? We have to go talk to our bishop when we're deciding to get married in the temple, and we need their permission. Are we worthy to get married in the temple? And I think, like you said, the church is getting better as far as controlling, when to have kids, how many children to have. But unfortunately, I think it's still in the culture. So I feel like the church could do a better job over the pulpit, continuing to share with the congregation, that these are personal decisions, and that we need to respect each member and what they choose to do with their life. Like they could do a better job there.
Brendan?
Yeah, I would kind of echo that same thing. I just had an internship with the gospel topic essays at the LDS Church History Department. And I had to go through a couple of different screenings with my bishop to make sure that I could do that. And I think that goes along with temple, just like was said already. A lot of these things you need to go and make sure there's, no worthiness issues or anything. And that's all in their court based on what they determine as worthy. So I think that's interesting.
Right. Heidi, how about you?
I guess in my experience, it was mostly not so much getting permission from church leaders as just permission from God. And especially like with your marriage, praying to know if this is the right one, going to the temple to receive confirmation of that. So, I mean, I don't really believe that anymore. So I mean, are you really getting permission from anyone, or is that just something that a conclusion that you already came up with on your own, and then you're attributing that to God? So I guess you think that you maybe were getting permission from someone. I think I came of age right when the church was starting to move away from the whole Mary, you do not use birth control. You should have kids right away. All of that. I think that was because I got married in 96, and I remember there were like Elder Holland had just been, he like gave a couple of talks about that were a little bit more progressive about, it's between you and the Lord, that kind of stuff. So I think I can see that progress in the church. I have no clue what it's like now, because I've been out for 10 years. So I don't know how things have changed, but, I definitely think that part's getting better. So I don't know. I didn't have any experiences personally with having to get permission to make important life choices other than permission from God, which is kind of up to your personal interpretation, I guess.
Yeah, you're reflecting some of the stuff I've thought about, Heidi, because I think the church has backed off in so many ways, but in some ways we're a culture where expectations are learned culturally. And so even though, we don't have to ask permission about whether or not to serve a mission, or permission to go to BYU, or permission to get married or have kids, or what career to follow, I think that Mormons have been doing this for so many decades that you're giving your patriarch, you're giving your baby blessing where the father tells you what your life's going to be. You're giving your patriarchal blessing where you're told you're going to get married in the temple, you're going to serve in the church, you're going to be faithful with the youth, you're going to, raise righteous children. And then there's all this cultural expectation. So it's not like you're going saying, well, should I go to Harvard or should I go to BYU? Should I marry young or marry old? It's kind of like built in so that you do that because that's what's expected. So you don't have to ask permission because you already know what you're supposed to be doing. And Heidi, like you say, that prayer where you're praying to God, well, of course, God isn't going to tell you to go join Islam when you're a devout Mormon. God's not going to tell you to, to put off marriage and don't get married and become a professor and become a lesbian. Like that, that's not what God tells you when you're raised Mormon. God just conveniently always tells you what you've been taught and conditioned to do, because that's what God is to you, is whatever the church has conditioned you to think of as God, unless you're independent spiritually, which that happens. But I think for most of us, that's not what happens. Any final comments on that?
No, I agree with all of that. And I think, I guess this kind of could be related to that in the sense that I remember at BYU, my husband, we were engaged at the time, and we took a Teachings of the Living Prophet class together. And our professor was, I think it was Brent Top. I think that's who my professor
I remember that guy.
Yeah. And it was a great class. I loved it. We just both loved that class. And but I remember this one lesson he was talking, and he said, we were talking about revelation and personal revelation. And we were talking about the living prophet, and how what the living prophet says takes precedent over what, past scriptures say. But he made the point, and I still remember he was holding this big quad, scriptures in his hand when he was talking. And he's like, this is the rod, this is the standard. The standard works. This is our standard. And so whatever the prophet says, the way that you can, you shouldn't just blindly obey the prophet. Whenever the prophet says something, you should pray about it and try to know for yourself, right? That God wants that. But the catch-22 is that the prophet will never reveal something that goes against the standard. The standard works. What's in the standard works. And so it's like, really, it's okay. Do you really follow the living prophet then, or do you really just follow what the scriptures say? So that was kind of, I was a little bit confused by that lesson. And obviously I still remember it. So it was powerful in some way.
Absolutely. Karen, Brendan, anything else you want to say about that point? We covered it?
You covered it.
All right. Well, listen, we've gone past our time. My wife Margie is expecting me for an appointment. So we're only going to cover slide 1 of the BITE model. And what we're going to do is we're going to invite you guys or other people on for subsequent episodes where we're going to process this BITE model in depth through a panel of people's personal experiences. But I just want to say, you 3 are lovely. You're smart, you're intelligent, you're insightful, and you found out about this like 10 minutes before or after I started, and you were willing to just come on without any priming or prep to be on the panel. So what I'm going to ask is for each of you to give us some closing thoughts. Thoughts about where you are now, thoughts about your journey, thoughts about the BITE model, thoughts about things you want to share with anyone who's listening, because I think you're awesome and because that's how we like to roll on Mormon Stories. So Brendan, we're going to do ladies last, men first this time. Give them the final word. Brendan, what do you want to say as we've processed the first part of behavior of the BITE model and your experience with Steve Hassan and what you've heard today? What do you want to share as kind of a closing thought or comment?
Yeah. First, thanks you again for letting us be a part of this. This has been awesome. But I think this has been a really interesting discussion. I think that there's so many parallels in so many ways. Not to say that Mormonism is a cult, but there's a lot of things that we could work on to make sure that we promote more individuality, more authentic living for each individual member. And I think we have a long way to go before we get there, but I hope that that's a position that the church can take eventually, where they welcome questions, where they welcome, individuality and authentic living and encourage people to do so. I think that would be the ideal world for us to live in. So thanks again for this discussion. This has been awesome. I'm glad I could be a part of it.
All right, Brendan, you've been great. Please, I owe you lunch or brunch or something because you just showed up so spontaneously. So let me return the favor to you, okay?
Sounds awesome.
All right, Brendan, you're awesome. Carah, share with us your wisdom, and we'd love to hear your parting comments.
John, thank you so much for having us on. I agree with Brendan. I really hope that the church can move in a more positive direction in encouraging individuality. I also just want to share with listeners that, I struggled myself with mental health concerns as far as I struggled with OCD most of my life, and the church, looking at this BITE method, I can see how it didn't cause my OCD, but it definitely exasperated it. And since leaving the church, I feel like I'm so much happier and my mental health is so much better. And not to say that it was easy to leave, but with time, it's brought me so much more peace. And so just my plug-in for that if you're struggling with leaving, that it does get better. And to also seek real counseling. That's my other plug-in as a mental health professional. I just, I think that's an unfortunate part of the church's encouraging to go to bishops instead of seeking professional help. So I don't know how much that's to do with this podcast, but I just want to put that plug in as well.
I love it. Carah, did you ever listen to the Mormon Stories episodes on scrupulosity?
No, I don't think so.
Oh my gosh. So my master's thesis, when I was on my way to get my PhD, my master's thesis for my clinical and counseling psych degree was on obsessive compulsive disorder, religious obsessive compulsive disorder. And scrupulosity is the name of religious OCD. And so that's what I did my master's on. And there's 2 episodes of Mormon Stories, one where I interview someone who had scrupulosity or religious OCD, and then another one where I release the results of my research. But you got to check that out. You got to learn that term. Maybe you can become a mental health professional specializing in supporting religious OCD because it's super cool to treat. It's very treatable. Listeners, go check out that episode if you haven't heard it. It's fascinating. Scrupulosity, it's one of my favorite things to talk about, things to treat. And Carah, you probably had it and didn't even know it.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'll definitely check those out.
Yeah, thanks for the shout out. And we want to have you guys back on Mormon Stories for panels. So Carah, Heidi, and Brendan, I'm going to give you a second, Heidi, to close, but all of you need to give Tim your contact information because we want to have you back. Heidi, we want to give you the last word. What do you want to share with our audience? And how's Josh, by the way?
He's doing great. Just thank you, John, for doing these podcasts and recordings. I just think that you're doing important work with helping people navigate this space in Mormonness, the Mormon land. I think it's really important for people to explore these topics, and I have very fond feelings towards the church, even though I'm so happy that I'm no longer part of it. So I guess I'll join Carah in saying that it does get better. It was hard to leave. It was so hard. But life is so much better on the other side. And we've raised our family, and I just love seeing my kids grow up into young adults. And they're just so free and experiencing life to the fullest. So there's my plug but I understand if you want to stay, and I think it's great for people to try to find that, to navigate that space of being authentic within the church and trying to be aware of how they can create, these healthy boundaries so that they're not maybe going to extremes in some of these problematic areas that we've kind of talked about. I think just as a whole, I would love to come back because I'm more interested in the other, the thought, emotional, and information control, because like I said earlier, those are the parts that influenced me the most. I'll just say it again. I think a lot of the behavior parts can be very positive in terms of, getting people to work hard and have structure in their life and all of those things. So, but anyway, I won't go into all that, but that's kind of my perspective about some of the positive aspects of the Mormon church. And then, some of the other negative things I think are more in those internal ways.
So Heidi, let's have you back, and you can opine on the ITE.
All right.
How's that sound?
Good. Sounds good.
Okay, make sure you get Tim your contact info, Carah and Heidi. All right. You guys are wonderful. Thanks to all of our listeners today who shared their comments and perspectives. If you want to appear on Mormon Stories Podcast as a panelist talking about the BITE model as it applied to your experience, please do join us. We'd love to have you. That would be really fun. As well, thanks to everyone who, we want believers. So we don't want the BITE model discussion to only be people who have left the church. That's just who joined us today. But if you're a believer, if you're a nuanced believer, if you're a New Order Mormon, if you're a neo-apologist, if you're a Orthodox believer, we want you to be part of these panels. So please reach out if you want to be a part of these panels, and we'll include you, especially if you're a believer or still attending church. We'd love to have you. If you say, I won't come on Mormon Stories because it's dangerous or scary, then you need to think about the BITE model and decide if you're being affected by something that is not healthy. Because that's what happens sometimes is people won't come on Mormon Stories because I've been labeled as dangerous. Mormon Stories has been labeled as inappropriate content. And guess what? That's what cults do. So don't fall prey to that. A healthy, confident organization isn't scared of John Dehlin, isn't scared of Mormon Stories, isn't scared of podcasts. They're not scared of people talking openly or learning things. They're open to that. So that's my attempt to bait and goad you into coming on Mormon Stories or manipulate you using shame and guilt, which is probably inappropriate. So I need to repent in a secular way. But please join us for a panel. We're going to cover the second half of BITE, of behavior, along with information, thoughts, and emotions in the coming week. So reach out, and we want to have you join us. Thank you for joining us. Thanks to everyone who supports us financially. We could not do Mormon Stories without the donors who support us. Donations are tax deductible. Go to mormonstories.org, click on the donate button, $10, $50, $100 a month, whatever you could afford. We are transparent in our finances, like all healthy organizations should be. And we try to live by these principles as best as we can. So please support us. And if you need to attend an intensive workshop or retreat to support you in your faith transition, we're doing Park City next week in June. We're doing Houston in July, Idaho Falls, and what else in August? Portland in August. We're doing in September, we're hoping to go to Switzerland and Sweden. In October, we're doing the Bahamas cruise. And in November, we're doing Sacramento. And we've got Midwest and Colorado in the works. So please go to mormonstories.org/events and sign up for a workshop or retreat if you think it would be helpful. You guys are awesome. Thanks to Tim Corey for producing, Cody Layton for helping with production, Amy Grubbs, Sharon Price for their work with events and for operations. You guys are awesome. Thanks to Steve Hassan for an amazing book, Combating Cult Mind Control. It's an amazing book. It will change your life. Even if you've left the church 10 years, 20 years ago, even if you're an active believing member, read this book, not because the Mormon church is a cult, but because it'll teach you to be healthier individually as a leader and with organizations. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye. Signing off. And we'll see you guys again soon on Mormon Stories Podcast.